Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Speculation Station. My name is Captain Ketter. I'm your host. I'm joined today by Bodhi. Say hi, Bodhi.
Hi again.
Hello, friends. Today, we are going to be doing a squadron tier list. We're going to split this up into two groups. The first group being aces, and the second group, all the generics. The aces will include the unique squadrons also. Um, and then the ranking, we will publish the rankings with the link here. Wherever you find this link, that's where it'll be. But we're also going to try and make this into a YouTube video so you can follow along and watch as we select the placement for each of these squadrons. So the rankings will be as follows. We have S, which is super, I guess we could say it stands for that. The S ranking is for all the squadrons who are really all around great for their points efficiency and damage output efficiency, and I guess movement efficiency as well. Um, the A ranking is going to be reserved for squadrons that are exceptional in their given niche, I guess. The B ranking is going to be those squadrons that are generally good all around or good at something in particular. The C ranking is going to be squadrons that are useful, but not good enough necessarily to take in a squad ball or a dedicated anti squadron screen. And then the F ranking is squadrons you should probably never take. If you put them on the board, you should be having a good time, not because you're trying to win. Would you agree with that, Bodhi?
Yeah, I have a few, just as I was kind of making my own rankings, which I pre-made mine. I know yours are going to be a bit more impromptu. But I had, so like S is my and it has to be a very difficult choice to not take one of the S tier squadrons. And for me, B tier is really strong squadrons, but they require synergy outside of just that squadron. So stuff like hyenas requiring bomber command center to really be truly good. I said in my description that Biggs is the quintessential B tier squadron, just because he doesn't do anything on his own, but with all of the B or all of the X wings, he's really good. And even my lowest ranking stuff, like I feel like there's some niche to it. But yeah, the D tier stuff is very hard to find an actual use for.
Okay, I'll go along with all those comments as well. I second those. um, so yeah, I am rather shooting from the hip today, but that's okay. Um, I would like to kind of have a corroboration on like where a squadron belongs, so that we have one tier list instead of two, if that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I'll say what I have like pre-made, and then I mean we can discuss it. I'm sure some of them will be a little controversial.
How
Some
fun!
of them probably won't.
All right, I think we should go ahead and start with the generics and get that small group out of the way, and then we'll run into the aces.
That's good.
All right. So starting off, I think we're going to go in alphabetical order based on how I type them in, which may not be how they appear on the actual title of the card. So first up is the Decimator. What do you think about this squadron?
Um, well, this is a D tier squadron. Yeah, I don't have much about the decimator. If it wasn't 22 points, I feel like it could be okay.
Yeah, I've gone up against them in swarms, and they do become extremely difficult to take down. If you don't have a fighter screen, then their anti-ship and ability to be rogue and follow you around is actually extremely deadly. Um, but typically, if you have a scatter ace, then the decimators are kind of useless until those get rid of, are gotten rid of.
Yeah, definitely. The
So
biggest problem for me in like their actual use is well, one scatters kind of shut them down, but um, the fact that they're heavy, like they don't they don't really do much. Like your opponent can, if they have squadrons, can reposition, tie them all down, and I mean, yesterday I played in a tournament up in Oklahoma, and Ben Burns had a decimator list with six of them, and I mean, it took me the whole game to chew them down, but I I got 160 points off of just killing his squadrons. I didn't even have to worry about ships to get a 7. I feel like that's kind of an issue.
So 134-ish points from squadrons, and then some leftover from something else. You then? That's what you mean?
Um, well, no, no. So he had, I don't remember exactly how many. He had 6 times 22.
Okay.
Um, he had, yeah, that is 132 points in squadrons. And then he took out one of my Arc 170s and one of my Y Wings.
Ouch.
And so, yeah, I mean, he also rolled really unlucky. He rolled more black blanks than anything else. He probably should have gotten a few more of my squadrons, but I was playing Yularen, so I was healing things up too. I don't know. I just decimators are bad.
Yeah, that's one thing I will say about the squadrons from the Imperials that don't have swarm, like the fire sprays and the decimator. Um, if you take that one officer, I think it's Commander Woldar.
Woldar, yeah.
Yeah, that guy is actually extremely good to fly around with a squad ball because he gives you an extra reroll. So highly recommend. But I think I would go with your ranking. You said D tier. I think right now we have S, A, B, C, and F.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, F.
F
I have
tier.
my own it on my own screen, and yeah, F tier for decimators.
Okay. I'll go ahead and do that as well, just because they are they're good against fighters. They're not good against ships unless the fighters are all gone. And then if you
They're
just
just too
have
expensive and they're heavy. Like
exactly.
that's really it. Like if one of those two aspects was not present, I feel like they could be fine.
All right. So they're in the F tier. We're going to move on to the next one on my screen is the YV666 from the Imperials. This is a speed 2 squadron with 7 hull. 2 black, 2 blue against squadrons, 1 blue against ships, and it has rogue. I think that's about it.
Yeah. This is also F tier for me. Um, I just Speed 2 and Rogue don't really work that well together. I mean, Speed 2 requires so much extra help. Like, you have to have the fighter coordination or squall or whatever, and that means that you probably have something that's going to activate squadrons, and they're just expensive for a weird niche that there's always a better choice than the YV666.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I like how much hull they have, but if you have to bring fighter coordination team just for this, it's uh kind of painful. Um, and then they're good at clearing squadron screens and hanging out during squadron screens while they're present. But then after that, they have a blue against ships, which is just mediocre. It's not very useful. And then they can't catch up to a ship if it's turns 5 or 6. It becomes a real problem trying to get points back. But they are 15 points, so not terrible on that front. But their lack of speed and uh, inability to deal out damage to ships consistently makes them in the F tier as well, along with the decimator, in my
Well, they're
opinion.
also heavy, so
Yes.
like, I don't know. This might be one of the worst generics in the game. Uh,
I have a soft spot in my heart for bad things that I want to make good. And if I were to fly a list like this with the YV666, it'd probably be something like an interdictor fighter coordination team targeting scramblers list. Kind of annoying, but definitely wouldn't be able to put out a lot of damage.
all right, well, you bring that to Osmo, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, I might bring something like that. We'll see.
All right.
Uh,
So,
the next squadron on my list is the TIE Phantom Squadron, which we've talked about before on the podcast. Um, I think this belongs in the F as well. It's not something. It's something that I have never seen taken competitively. Period. It's got good speed. It's got a four hole. It's got two anti-ship red dice, which is not terribly consistent, but has a high damage ceiling, and then four blue dice against squadrons with cloak. So it has an ability to dodge kind of and like leave the area for a turn and then jump back in. Um, Kind of deadly if you keep them around stations and have fighter coordination team with it, but no dice mitigation, and I think they die too fast and they don't do enough for their points. I think I think before I said the way to fix them probably would be to have dodge and maybe add one black dice, which I think would take it up to like a B tier. I think currently they still are sitting in the F.
Yeah. Um, I've seen. Well, okay, so like the main consideration with Phantoms for me is that they're effectively speed 5 plus, because 4 plus 1 is just slightly more than 5. Um, but in the role that they're trying to fill, they just don't do it that well. They look like they're supposed to be like they go in on the squadron activation for like a during the ship phase, and they go and kill a couple of squadrons and then cloak out of engagement, and then they can go and bomb stuff. But like you said, the red dice are just not consistent. I know there's some proponents for using them in Sloan lists, like the people who think that Sloan is a problematic commander, just because there's only one red accuracy face, and you still get the rerolls for the crits, which aren't going to be doing anything for the Phantoms. Um, so like I don't know. The only time that I've actually seen Phantoms played has been in Sloan lists, and the one time that I took them because I thought Cloak was cooler than it actually is.
Yeah, they have what is the word? It's when the you have something better to take for fewer points. Like they're not efficient.
Yeah,
Um the TIE Phantom's 14 points, and then it doesn't do much more than a TIE Interceptor. The TIE Interceptor has counter too, so at least it deals damage as it goes out, and then you can use reserve hangar deck to get it back.
yeah. And
So
I think I would rather have a black die for anti-squad than two reds. So,
you mean anti-ship?
or yeah. Sorry.
Do you mean black or blue dice? Because the Interceptor has blue dice.
Oh man, you're right. I'm thinking about A-wings and tri-fighters. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
I don't know. I feel like I'd still rather have the blue dice. There's more faces. I mean, it's 4 compared to 3, but
In a
anyway,
world,
we'll get into interceptors
yeah,
later.
in a faction where there's Sloan, I can agree. I think I'm really convinced. Maybe I'm gonna take Phantoms. We'll see. This Osmo. We'll see. All right, the next. Oh, I should tell where I put this one. I think it. I have it in the F tier. If there was some change or errata that changed it, I think it could be bumped up to the B tier.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I feel like that's the case with a lot of these. They're just lacking in one aspect that makes it so well. Some of them have more than one aspect, but yeah, they're lacking enough that there's a better choice, and that's kind of why having this tier list it exists for me, just because there's better choices.
yeah, I feel like what we're going to see at the end of this is all of the ones in the F tier or C tier have like a niche, and then the ones in the S tier and A tier are going to be better all around, and then fulfill a niche like extremely well. So, moving on, the next one I have on my screen is the A Wing from the Rebels. Do you want to give a description of this guy?
Sure. Well, so every faction except for Republic has a speed 5 counter squadron. Um, this is what Rebels have, and I don't know. A-wings are really good. They have 4 hull compared to Separatist and Empire having 3 hull, and that really means a lot. There's a lot of things in the game that can one-shot 3 hull squadrons, and the fourth hull for A-Wings means that it's going to stick around, and it's going to do its job as a screen for just one more squadron activation, which is critical. They also work really well as a multi-purpose because of the black die for anti-ship. So if your opponent is squadless, they can go and have 6/8 of a chance to do a damage, which a lot of rebel fleets that are built around multiple small units care about that ping damage a lot. A-Wings are, I mean, I feel like there are some better options. So I have them in A tier personally, but I mean, A-Wings to me are the best of the best when it comes to a screening squadron. If you have the points for them, they are 11, which is a little expensive for a generic, but A-Wings are great.
Yeah, I agree with you. We were actually not showing each other our standings, and I also put in the A tier. I think that um, the only thing that could move it up to S tier would be Rogue, or
I
getting.
think that would be a bit too much.
I know it would be too
Yeah.
much, but or an extra hole. So if there was a commander out there or an upgrade card that lets you like recover hull on a squadron, kind of like Yularen, but like on a flotilla,
Mm,
having like a hangar bay or something, then I think that that could boost it up. But in the context of having Torn around, um, that makes the counters on the A-wings like much more powerful, similar
yeah.
to the Imperials having Swarm. So their attacking like counter attack is really good, and then the black dice against ships, the consistency is really nice. So an excellent squadron to take for fighter ambush or something like that. Superior positions, just so you can blink away at an enemy ship.
Oh
It's
yeah.
consistent points, a good choice, solid A tier pick. Do you want to? Actually, we're not sharing screens. I'll give you the next one. The aggressor assault fighter from the Imperials, the Rogue.
See, the aggressor, it feels so close to at least being usable to me. Um, I don't know. It's like if it was, I have to remind myself on exactly what they do. It's speed 3, 5 hull, 4 blue for anti squad, 1 black for anti ship. They have rogue and counter 1. Um, and all of that feels really great. It's just they're 16 points and they're in a faction of cheap disposable things. Um, and then when it's compared to the YT 2400 at the same point cost, it's slower and it has less hull, and it trades that for counter 1. So I don't know. I feel like there are some use cases for the aggressor, but there's just better stuff in the faction. I don't see a world where it's not F tier currently.
I actually have it at B tier.
Really?
I would make an argument for it at B tier. It's not fast. It's at speed 3, but it's got 5 hull, which is not terrible. It's got a good anti-squadron ability with 4 dice and a consistent damage against ships with a black dice.
Hmm.
So I think the fact that it has counter 1 is almost laughable. You get almost nothing out of that.
I
Um,
don't know. I mean, counter 1 adds up if like especially like Arc 170s have only counter 1, but you're gonna get stuff out of that. Um,
but usually in Arc 170s, you have them in a like a dedicated ball.
that's true.
With the aggressor, I think you're mismanaging your points if you have if you take these at all for 1. But if you have multiples of these with counter 1, I think you're also mismanaging your points as the Imperials.
Yeah. I don't know if I could justify it in B tier. I mean, maybe C, because they're definitely better than Decimators and YV666s. Um,
I'll compromise
but
and see.
okay, yeah, because like what lists are actively wanting aggressors? They have, I don't know. If they were in a different faction, I feel like they'd be fantastic. Well, namely one of the Clone Wars factions, but I don't know. It's just like Empire kind of needs the tools that the aggressor has the least.
Hmm.
I don't know that I'm kind of tempted to make them work because I every time I look at them, they seem really decently statted. It's just I they're held back just by like the fact that the Empire's synergy cares about
I
other
think
stuff.
I actually think maybe one of the best ways to fly them would be to hang around the station for one, but then also be obstructed
Mm-hmm.
so that for one, so you can touch the station again, but also just jump past a squadron ball. Um, the four dice allow you to shoot through obstruction without too much of a loss, and then you can fly away, and you just try to continue that obstruction to keep yourself alive. I don't know. That's just a thought.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that does mean that counter one doesn't work. So,
I put no faith in counter one. Okay, the next squadron we have that you can take away is the Arc 170.
sure. I think arcs are uh, they're kind of like a linchpin in the Republic strategy. Um, I feel like they're the quintessential Yularen squadron, and they just do a lot of things right. Like they're incredible for anti-squad. They're incredible for anti-ship. They're held back by being speed 2, but this is an faction with efficient peltas that can take fighter coordination teams and move them around. Um, I have them in A tier. I feel like maybe they might be a B tier squadron just because they require the extra synergy across the fleet. Kind of like I was talking about in the beginning. Like they're efficient on their own, but in order to really get use out of them, you have to have other parts in your fleet.
Yeah, I have
So,
them at a B tier,
okay.
and
I like B tier.
the reason I chose that is a couple things. The two speed two is not great. You have to synergize with fighter coordination team. The red dice in the anti squadron hurts them, but the counter one kind of alleviates that a little bit. Usually when you're flying these, what happens is you're going to run into another person's squad ball, and then hopefully by turns 5 and 6, they haven't had a dedicated anti-flak, or excuse me, just flacking at your squad ball, and their squad ball didn't do enough damage to you to wipe you out. So, um, yeah, they need to hang out and survive until turns 5 and 6 before they're useful, and then by that time, the enemy ship may have been able to fly away if they're speedy. So the use case for them is like you fly a squad forward, use fighter coordination team to push them, and then you kind of have to trap the enemy ship and hope it doesn't get away. Um, and hopefully you get your bombing run off before they escape. Or it's kind of unlikely that all of your arcs will die given the amount of points or the whole points that they have. But it's possible that a good anti-squadron screen will just clean them up. I mean, it's difficult, but it's possible.
I don't know. Republic are the best faction at winning the squadron war. Uh, it's pretty hard to beat a dedicated Arc 170 ball. I do agree that like actually like transitioning to bombing after that can be difficult, especially if the ships are running away. But like at that point, you've won the squadron war.
Yeah, I
I don't
guess
know. Yeah, but
I'm coming at this from the standpoint of I've never actually played Imperial or not Imperial, Republic,
gotcha.
and that's my strategy most of the time. Is if I see arcs, I'm just going to fly away from them because they can't catch up to me. If I
Yeah,
put a
okay.
squadron in the way and then they can't use fighter coordination team, then it's kind of points that are wasted on a squadron.
Mhm.
But they are good.
Yeah.
Um,
I
they
think they're competitive, but they require synergy, so they're a B tier
yeah.
squadron.
Okay. The next squadron I have in the list is the B-wing squadron from the Rebels. This is kind of akin to the Arc 170 in the fact that it has a speed 2, but it only has 5 hull, and it has 3 anti-squadron blue dice, and then for bombing it has 1 black, 1 blue. It is not heavy, the keyword it has is bomber. It's 14 points. Um, I love B wings, but it is so difficult to make them work, and they suffer from uh, a smaller hull value than the Arc 170, and that means that they don't hang out as long. So when people see B wings, they kind of have the same strategy I do, which is run away from them. It's really hard to catch up, and then uh, if there's a squad screen from the other team, uh, and you don't have escort, then these guys don't stick around very long with their 5 hole. So personally, I would put them at C tier. They have a use case, much more than the other squadrons in the F tier, but not as good as the arcs, definitely.
I agree with C tier.
Have you ever flown the B wings?
I have. I have a. So when I was touring every commander in the game, uh, I got to Garm, and I built a triple Rebel Pelta list because I actually really like the Rebel Peltas, specifically the command variant. Well, actually, I think it's the assault variant. Um,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah. I don't know. They are expensive. That is the downside, especially compared to the Republic one. Um, but they can do some cool stuff. And I built a Garm list with 3 Rebel Peltas and Bright Hope. And it was just built around fighter coordination teaming, the B Wings around, and then a few other, like all of the aces were all bombers that were decent on anti squadron as well. Um, and it's a really fun list, but I think B Wings are they're fun tier. Like I wouldn't bring them to a competitive tournament, but I would play them in a casual tournament.
The one tournament where I flew them, I had a really good time putting them on Quantum Storm with reserve hangar deck. Or
Mm.
no, what is it called? Uh, the one where you drop them off.
Um, Rapid launch base.
Rapid launch bays. So I had Quantum Storm with rapid launch bays, and then I had rapid launch bays on another ship. And the idea was to alpha strike with the B wings before an anti-squadron ball could lock them down.
It's fun.
It was a fun tournament. I think I placed third overall, but I would recommend it. Like I think either that or slicer teams is the only reason you take Quantum Storm.
Yeah.
Okay, so fun tier in the C category. The next squadron is the Belbelub 22 from the
Yeah.
CIS. Do you have any experience flying those guys?
I don't have any experience flying the generic version. They're kind of like aggressors in a way, where they're at a similar price point, 5 hole, and then they have 4 anti-ship, or sorry, anti-squadron dice. Screen is nothing to scoff at. It can definitely help, and separatists like having things bunched up in balls, so it's kind of like a pseudo dodge. Um, the main issue with them is they just don't work well with the other tools that separatists have, and the blue anti-ship is really not good on a 15-point squadron. Like this is something that you want to live through the squad war and then transition into a multi-purpose. Or if your opponent doesn't have squads, you want it to have a use. And it just doesn't really fill that niche. In a similar vein to the aggressor, like I would like to try them sometime because they do have a decent stat line. It's hard to justify for the cost, and they just don't fit with the tools that separatists have.
Yeah, I think they suffer from a keyword issue. Um, I think AMG kind of fixed it a little bit by putting escort on Wat Tambor, but
If they
um,
were escorts, like if the generics were escorts, I think they'd be really good.
I agree. I think that they would be worth taking, and they would make the CIS squad ball a nuisance.
Yeah. Or if they
Um,
had Rogue. If they had Rogue, then they'd be pretty cool too.
yeah, I could see that. Either way, they could be improved.
Yeah.
The relay
I have
one, I've never seen anyone use relay in the CIS squadrons.
Relay is a very powerful mechanic. Relay 1 is definitely worse than like Relay 2, obviously, but um, there is some use cases for it.
It's
Um,
always good to have.
yeah, it's like it lets you play just like a little bit more loose with your squadrons, which is always a benefit. Um, but yeah, they fall short in a few aspects, and I don't know. I have them in F. I could probably be negotiated up to C because, but I don't know. I've never seen them actually played, so
I think it depends on how we're going to look at it. Like if we're looking at this competitively, like do you want to? I guess we should have had this conversation beforehand, but if we're looking at it from the fun aspect, I'd say they're a C. If we're looking at it from a competitive standpoint, I'd definitely put them in an F.
if aggressors are going to be C tier, I think the Belbelubs can be C tier.
Okay.
Maybe we should have included a D because I feel like that's where I might put both of those. Because I think the B wings are both better than B wings are better than both aggressor and Belbelub.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't want to add a whole tier midway through, so let's just put Belbelubs in C
Okay.
because
Well,
I think
I can rearrange the order of these and make the B wings look like the front of C.
okay, sure, let's do that.
There we go. So Bubblubs in the C tier,
Yeah,
kind of the fun tier. I guess we can denote if
yeah,
something is for fun or competitive.
yeah.
In that case, we should maybe put a little asterisk next to the decimator and say can be competitive. It's in the F tier, but that's for points, mostly points efficiency in the heavy.
I would never fly a decimator competitively personally.
I've seen Morna. I've seen the decimator generic, but I don't think I've ever seen a list where someone took the decimator generic and thought that at the end of it they should have taken that one. Like I think a lot of
Yeah,
people decided something else would have been better.
agreed.
Okay, the next squadron we have here, we are just chugging along. The BTLB Y Wing from the Republic. Do you want to talk about that one?
I would love to. This is an S tier squadron for me. Um, so this is one of the most efficient squadrons in the game in almost every aspect. They play to the strength of the Republic extremely well, and they do it for only 10 points. Speed 3 is kind of average. I would not shame a squadron for being Speed 3. But the real kicker is 6 hull. Like, this is very rarely, it's going to take effort to take out a Y Wing. And then they hit back decently hard. And like when you have a Venator 2 that can activate 5 or 6 squadrons in one go, and like sometimes they'll play fight controllers on them. You know, a blue and a black. I mean, that's like 1 damage almost all the time. Um, and with flight controllers, 1 to 2 damage. I don't know. Like they just do so much for anti-squad as a heavy bomber. And then once you win the squad war, they bomb with a black with bomber. And if you have bomber command center, then it fixes the die. They're crazy efficient. And heavy, this is the one case I feel like that heavy is not really a downside. Because Republic fleets will play like 4 or 6 of these. And if you like go and ignore them or try and take advantage of the heavy, then you're probably playing into what the Republic player wants. They have really good flak. A lot of their flak is like blue-black. And if they play the Y-Wings close to home, then you're going to be tying them down in their flak bubble. And then if you're tying, if they launch their stuff in to go bomb, and then you tie it down, then they probably got off the bombing run. I don't know. I could gush about Y-Wings all day. I think they're really good.
The only thing you left out was Ruthless Strategists.
Oh yeah. I meant to mention that too. Ruthless Strategist is my favorite card in the game, and they're a 10-point ruthless boat. I don't. They're great. They're awesome.
Wicked points efficient. When you have flight controllers, it makes them completely nasty. And when you compare them to the Rebel Y Wings, it's just uh even like the only difference is they have a black instead of a blue, and it's so much better.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. All right, so I would agree with you. They're at S tier. The next squadron we have is the E-wing squadron, which I have some experience with. Have you flown that one?
Um, I think this is one of the few generics that I haven't touched yet. Actually, no, that's not true. I did a team game, and we had a couple generics in the list, but I didn't touch them. So,
Okay, well they are a Speed 4 5-hull squadron with 4 blue anti squadron and 1 red anti ship with bomber keyword, and they've got the Snipe 3 keyword as well. So when you fly these, the way I have flown them is I'll bring them with Shara and Tycho, and then I'll tie up squadrons with Shara and Tycho, and then snipe from range, so that the enemy player has to shoot to Shara and Tycho, and then these guys are protected behind the firing line, and then they can bomb ships afterward. So I I think in the context of the Rebel squadrons, I think they I want to put them in B tier, but I think they belong in C tier. Like with flight controllers, you can do a snipe 4 and use Torn to get a reroll. It feels great, um, but I would rather have something else. So because of that fact, I just don't think I can put them above C tier.
yeah, I ranked them at F originally, but I think I'm content with C. Um, I don't like snipe. I think I would rather actually engage the squadrons most of the time. There are use cases for snipe, like Ahsoka Officer, um, but that's mainly just to get like I fly Ahsoka Officer with arcs because it kind of gives them an extra speed one. Um, but I mean the E-wings are speed 4, like they don't need it for that. Um, and their snipe is worse than their actual attack. So like you kind of just want to engage them anyway, which invalidates the keyword. Um, and like when you're sniping, you get around counter and you make it so that they have to take a squadron activation to move and shoot. Like they can't just like wait till the squadron phase and then hit you back, which there's benefit to that. But if they're flying a lot of squadrons, they're probably going to have a carrier that's going to let them move and shoot anyway. And then it just lets them, like now you have pushed your E-wings ahead, and it's going to let them reposition because you're not engaged. And then they can take advantage of you moving your E-wings out. So if you have Shara and Tycho to tie their stuff down and then snipe them while they're in engagement, then that seems a little bit more potent. But I mean, just E-wings on their own, I don't like. But I think I can agree with C tier.
Okay, yeah. You have to kind of think of it in the context of the rest of the fleet, I guess.
Yeah.
So they, I feel like you do have to have a specific build for them to work. And after your explanation, I almost kind of want to put them in F tier as well, along with the Phantoms. But they're fast. They've got a decent hold to stick around. So as just a general squadron, I think C tier is okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll let you talk about the next one. This is the fire spray from the Imperials.
All right. I'm not sure. I've been following along with you, and I have the Delta first. I'm not sure if it's appeared later for you.
Oh no, you're right. Yeah. So that's a little flub on my part because I picked up the Delta and I couldn't put it back down underneath.
Oh, gotcha.
So yeah, you can talk about the Delta, then I'll take the fire spray.
Okay. So the Delta is the Republic's like I don't know, like ace unique, I guess. They're the Belbelub of the Republic. Um, they do a lot of things. Like they've got counter and dodge and adapt, but they're 17 points, and it's really really hard to take a generic squadron that costs that much in like, and you still have to command them. Like if they were rogue, I would really like them. Um, and there are a few fleets that I will put them in, but there's just not many. I feel like they're a C tier squadron.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like you would rather save the points from the Aether Sprite and then put that towards a bid so you can definitely take second player and put Mercy Mission out there.
Hmm.
So you kind of guarantee a spot uh, and a flight plan for your ships.
I mean, there is so like they kind of fit nicely into one specific squadron ball. Um, if you have Anakin, Axe, Kickback, 6 Y-Wings, and 1 Delta, then it's right at 134.
Okay.
So like that's the one fleet that I have in my list builder that uses a Delta. Um, but other than that, like I there's not very many reasons I'd want it.
Okay. I'm feeling like I'm looking at the list right now and I'm not comfortable with the way it looks. So I actually kind of want to add in the D tier
Okay, sure.
because I feel like the Aether Sprite. What did you say? C tier?
I said C tier for the Aether Sprite.
Okay. I was gonna put them in B tier, but because of the points, because they have dodge and adept, right?
They have dodge, adapt, and counter.
Yeah. Um. So they're very good about putting out damage and making it consistent, and then they have the chance to skip out on some damage. Um. Yeah, I could go for C tier.
So are we adding a D then?
Yeah, I'm gonna add it in right here. I'm gonna move the Belbala and the E-wing, probably the aggressor, down to D tier.
Okay, I can agree with all those things.
Once I figure out where to add
You
the
click the settings and then add row below or above, and then you can change the color from there.
you're like a pro.
I am cool.
All right. That's looking more even now. All right, the next
Yeah.
squadron we have on the list is the Mandalorian Gauntlet Fighter. Now this is
Wait,
a
now we
Speed
skip the fire
4.
spray.
Oh my goodness, you're so right. And I don't even think I'm going to edit this.
That's
All right,
okay.
the Fire Spray from the Imperials is definitely an S tier squadron. I think it earns its points. It's not super great on the anti-squadron. It's got 2 blue anti-ship dice, but it's speed 3, 6 hull with rogue. So it is very good about hunting down enemy ships and then sealing a victory for players. I've used this multiple times to secure victories in matches. It's super good. They can hang out and duel out with fighters for a little bit and until help arrives. But usually you kind of hang them in the back or on the side and then send them in for the kill on an enemy ship. So I think they're an easy S tier pick. What do you think?
Um, this is going to be our first major disagreement.
Oh no.
I have them in B tier. Um, so fire sprays, like okay, so I agree with all of the points that you said. Um, and they're really good. They're 18 points, which is just like a little bit higher than I'd want. But they're really fun. The main problem for me is that they have anti-synergy with a lot of things that Empire is trying to do. And if you're bringing fire sprays, I've just found that it's hard to fit in a full ball. Like if you're bringing multiple fire sprays, then it probably means that you're playing 6 squadrons, and I mean, some lists are happy with that. I personally would rather have 8 if I'm trying to like actually win the squad war. Um, so I don't know. Like they just feel so close, but the point cost makes them like keeps them out of S tier for me. I could probably go A if you negotiate with that, but
Okay, because you negotiated with me and we compromised on the other one, I feel like it's fair to compromise on this one. Although I still, in my heart, I still believe they're S tier.
okay.
All right, and you want to take the Mandalorian Gauntlet Fighter?
I'd love to take the Mandalorian Gauntlet Fighter. These guys suck. Um, I don't know. So
I'm not going to disagree.
yeah, when I first got the Chimera pack, I fielded 2 generics, and like I was pretty bad at the game then, and I still realized that they were bad. Honestly, the only reason that I actually put them on the table is because I bought my Chimera used, and the guy had painted the Gauntlet Fighters, and they look really pretty. Um, but they're just too expensive. I think when FFG made them, they thought that Raid was going to be a little bit more powerful than it actually turns out being, and so they overvalued the assault. Um, like 2 blue for anti squad or anti ship is pretty cool. And their speed 4 and rogue, which is something that I'll talk about later as being very strong. Um, but they just don't fight squadrons very well, and they're way too expensive. And so in the Oklahoma community, the TO put out a post a month ago that in order to like just to see an attempt to finish, not finish, but like an attempt to work on Separatist and Republic, he kind of made a homebrew rule that you could bring Gauntlet fighters in any faction, just because like in the lore they were used by most of the factions, actually by all of the factions. So. And then yesterday there was a tournament up there, and nobody even bothered. Like even in the Separatists, which with TF could get the most use out of them, like they're still not worth it.
Yeah, I think I see where this is headed
Yeah, after.
for sure. Yeah, they're expensive. They're not very good at anti-squadron. They don't have a reroll for their red dice in anti-squadron. Um, they would fairly often get an assault off on somebody with their 2 blue dice against ships, but too often they're tied up by an anti-squadron ball and they're not going to pull that off. So F tier. All right, the next squadron we have up is the Hawk 290 from the Rebels. This is I think 12-point speed 3 4-hole ship with 2 blue anti-squadron, which is laughable. Um, it's also fairly laughable with the Y-wing squadron, which we'll get to, and then 1 blue anti-ship. Its only keyword is intel, I believe. I'm looking at
And
half
counter 2.
and counter 2. Okay, I still think it's garbage, hot garbage.
Oh,
Um,
the back in old Intel days, which I did not play back then, but old Intel does seem really strong. I think there is a use for generic Hawk, but the generics now are really, really bad.
yep, there's no argument right there. Um, even in the old days, he would take Jan way before
Yeah.
you'd take this one ever. The only way for them to make them like useful now, I think, if you're not going to touch their dice, I think you add Swarm. I think that would be good for them. It would give them a reroll on their attack and their counter, and then you could revive them with Reserve Hanger deck. But I, that's the only reason I think someone would take them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could make them, you could probably take them down to like 7 points, like the Z95s, and then they would get taken probably. But in their current state,
Yeah.
it's just flat F tier.
Yeah,
All right, the next one on the list is the Hyena Droid Bomber. You want to take that one away?
sure. So hyenas are definitely a B tier for me. Um, like they're pretty cool, but kind of as I was talking about in the intro, without Bomber Command Center in the fleet, they're just too inconsistent to really bother with. There are a few times that I might consider taking them, and if you've never flown like 8 of them in one fleet, like try it online or something. It's pretty goofy. Um, they're really cheap for a double dice bomber, which I value a lot, and they're speed 4, which I also value a lot. Um, but I mean, they just like they're really good for a separatist squadron, but I can't go higher than B tier because they need you to put more effort in other places in your fleet.
I would argue C tier. Um, and I'll tell you why. The reason is they're only 4 hull, so unless you're swarming, like you said, with 8 of them or something, too often the enemy player can just snipe these guys and eliminate them from the equation, and then it's like however many points you invested in these guys is just wasted because they can't really do much against squadrons.
I mean,
So
so like 4 hull is not really bad. Like some of the best squadrons in the game have 4 hull. Um, and you're not really like these are you keep them behind your ships, and then like say you're a Providence fleet, for example, with Squadron 4, and you have 4 hyenas, and you have gotten into medium or close range with your double arc. You activate all 4 and then send them into their front arc. If you have Bomber Command Center in your fleet, you're probably going to get 2 damage. So like 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage. And then you get to unload your Providence shot. Like these are not squadrons that like they're not multi-role at all. They are dedicated bombers, and they're going to stay protected by your other stuff, and then you're going to launch them when you need to.
okay, I think I am still uh not convinced they're B tier along with the arcs. Um, I think the arcs are more versatile, even though they're speed 2. But I'll let you have this one if I can have the next one,
All right.
the ranking as far as the split.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's something we should move on to in the next like series of our uh body of work in this project of Speculation Station is like how to's, because that is the only way to use these guys effectively is just keep them out of the fight and then bring them in when you need them or when the anti squadron uh, ball from the other player is gone. So we'll move those guys
Like
up to
separatists,
B tier.
separatists never win the squad war, but their vulture droids are really good at taking out a couple key targets and then like tying down the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if you have 4 vulture droids and 4 hyenas is a pretty common setup. And so, if your opponent's ship moves in and then you activate the 4 vultures, go and tie their stuff down, and then send in the hyenas, you can get a bombing run or 2 off. And then if your opponent goes and diverts their resources to taking out the hyenas, you're happy because they're not going to bomb your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they ignore the hyenas, then you're still kind of happy because then you just get to keep bombing them. So
Okay.
I don't know. They're fine. They're not great. The turn that you roll like 2 doubles with them is going to feel crazy, but then sometimes you're going to roll no damage and you're going to feel really bad.
It's like Z95s.
Yeah, their Z95s is a bummer, I guess.
Yeah, the Z95s never show up for me. I see them show up for other people, and I'm praying
Yeah,
like, God, I've seen what you've done for other people. I want that for me as I'm rolling these red dice, and it just doesn't show up.
yeah.
All right. The next squadron is the Jump Master. Was that 5,000? I can't read that small little.
I think they're 500s.
5,800?
No, no, they're 5,000s.
Okay. Jump Master 5,000. So this guy is speed 4, 4 hull, 2 blue dice, 1 blue against ships, and they have the intel keyword. and they have swarm. So what was lacking in the Rebel version with the intel is present in the Jump Master. However, uh, they see no use. Almost, I've never seen them taken. Um, the only time I've ever seen intel taken in Imperials is with Dengar, and that's really just to give everybody +1 counter. Um, let's see.
I kind of don't hate the Jump Master. Like, your point about giving the Hawk swarm, like, it's kind of present here. And so I feel like it's like I still have it in F tier because there's not a lot of use for it. Um, but like your point about swarm is correct. Like, it does make the Jump Master a little bit better than the Hawk.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think it carries it out of F tier.
yeah,
But the reason it's not any good really with the Imperials is because the Imperials really want to just throw haymakers with
yeah,
their
exactly.
squadrons. They just want to just throw like I don't know, punch after punch with their interceptors or other base squadrons. They're not trying to just slink away and then do something else somewhere. Um, the only time I think that would be the case would be like Maul or Mythal.
Hmm.
But aside from that, I don't think it's super useful. Like if you have bombers and you have the intel here, I'm almost certain the enemy player is just going to send 2 squadrons instead of 1 to lock down everything, and then you're just stuck in the same place. You wasted 12 points, you know.
Agreed.
So F tier. All right, Lambda shuttle, your turn.
All right. I have Lambda shuttles in A tier. Um, I mean, strategic is a really, really powerful keyword. Um, when it comes to like the Imperial faction, I think Lambdas are in A tier. When it comes to like overall, I don't know, maybe like B and a half. Like they're not quite as good as the VCX, just because they're 2 points less, where like they don't really get any other benefit. Actually, no, they're Relay 2 instead of Relay 1. Relay 2 is really good. Um, but I don't know. They're just they don't punch very well. They don't live very well. Um, but they're strategic, and so I don't know, maybe A tier.
I think, um, let's see. I think I agree with you, but the reason is because it's strategic and they're pretty good at anti-generic squadrons
True.
with their double black anti-squadron. If you had to, you could use flight controllers and go 2 black, 1 blue, and that's not anything to scoff at. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Speed 3, pull 6, hard to get rid of. Usually people aren't shooting these; they'll be shooting something else, but it opens up a whole new window of objective choices for you, and then the ability to flip objectives, which is huge.
Hmm.
So I think A tier is a good choice for them. You don't have to take them; they're not necessary, but you can save some points with boosted comms and switch out, put these guys in, and then have a lot more versatility in your fleet. So A tier, I think, is a good choice.
Another key point is that for the Sloan enjoyers, these guys do bomb with a blue die, and they do not have rogue. So they're pretty good with Sloan too.
I feel like we're just finding more and more things that are functional as Sloan, and I don't see people use it, but I feel like we're going to start seeing it after this.
Well, it was the third place list at Worlds. The Slonager had one Lambda in it. Maki's list.
Oh yeah, Maki. Maki's a good player.
He's real good.
He's taught me many things through his victories and my learning times.
Hmm.
Okay, so Lancer class pursuit craft is the next one. That one is 4 speed, 4 hull, 3 anti-squadron, and a black anti-ship with bomber and rogue. Where do you think that one falls?
I originally ranked them in F. They're kind of in like the same vein as aggressors. Like they're a rogue squadron that's not as good as the best rogue squadron in the faction. So
Okay.
I think they're a D tier.
I I think, oh man, they don't have as good anti-squadron as, we'll just come out and say it. The YT-2400 is what we're comparing everything to.
Yeah,
If
yeah. When you put it that way, compared to the YT-2400, the YT-2400 just does everything so much better. Um,
it deserves to be 18 points, I think, instead of 16, like this fire spray.
yeah, I can agree with that. Well, I don't know, because like they still are pretty niche. But anyway, we'll talk about them later.
Sure.
I could keep the Lancers in F tier, but I mean, I don't know. Like they just seem so similar to the aggressor. Like the aggressor is worse than the fire spray.
I think D tier is a good place for
Yeah.
them.
Okay.
Um, they are very useful. Like if people were to take these, then their rogue allows them to chase down ships and then pump out consistent damage with the option of the chance of 2 damage,
Yeah.
which is better than the YT-2400. But let's be honest, you'd rather have the 2 extra hull and the consistent damage to go with it. So yeah, I think D tier is a good place for them. I think they have uses, but you have other things that are typically better. So
Yeah.
D's the spot for them. The next one is the Skurk. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I feel like the Scourge is like the big brother to the B-Wing. Um, the extra speed and the extra hull makes the heavy worth it. And then grit is like the killer here. They're not as potent for the squadron war because they shoot squadrons with one less die, and heavy makes it a little more difficult. But they can leave engagement, and so when you pair it with some squadrons that can, like, you know, take out. When you pair it with some squadrons that can kill other squadrons, um, and then like actually utilize the grit, it means that you have to put less work into winning the squadron war, and then you can go bomb things. And then also, they're most commonly seen in Gallant Haven fleets, and it's pretty hard to kill a 6-hull squadron with Gallant Haven and Jan nearby. So I personally have them in B tier.
Yeah, I put them in B as well.
Okay.
I think I think they're a stealth pick for A. Like I think they actually could go in A. They're very effective at bombing. They don't have rogue, but with cheap GR-75s, it's not that big a deal. I
Yeah. They
in
just
my
they require a little bit of extra help to function well, and so like I don't like A kind of work really well independently or just strong enough that they can round out a squadron ball, but like the B tier squadrons to me need more help, and Skirks need help.
hmm That's fair. Yeah, they need somebody to do the anti-squadron work while they try to get away and do some bombing.
Exactly.
So I think you could almost throw Ruthless in there and then have just a couple A-wings, and then
Hmm.
I think that would be enough.
And Ruthless can go on Gallant Haven. It's
Yes.
it's a good list.
And it can go on Vanguard if somebody wants to double it up.
It's true.
That would be wild. All right. The next squadron we have is the TIE Bomber from the Imperials. Speed 4, 5 hull, 1 black against squadrons, and 1 black against ships with the bomber keyword. It is 9 points, and for what it does, I feel like it belongs in maybe the C tier just because it's cheap. It does have an effective job at bombing. If you want it to go against generics, it can do probably A damage. But if it wasn't cheap, I would put it in the D tier maybe.
Yeah, I also ranked these guys at C. There's the slight disclaimer that I was running a Thrawn list that would Ruthless off of these guys, and I did really, really well with that list. Um,
Is that at a LSO?
at LSO and at the Norman, Oklahoma Classic.
Oh, nice.
Um, 9 points is the thing here, and all of Empire's squadrons are single role type of guys, and these guys are really good at bombing. But the fact that they're cheap and they have enough hull that you're happy to ruthless off of them made them that was what they were used for in my list, and I feel like that's the main use for them. So C tier is for niche stuff, and C tier is where they go.
Yeah, I think we should compare them to the fire sprays for a moment and just show that they're half the points of a fire spray. They give you four more hull if you double them, right? So it's a ruthless off of them is actually really powerful. Um, they're speed four, which is faster than the fire spray. So if you have the ability to activate these guys with like a Gazanti or a carrier of some sort, then they're pretty effective. Um, the only negative thing is that the fire sprays don't have heavy, so you would need something to hold the enemies down. But two bombers can be effective comparing to in comparison to a fire spray, especially because that gives you an extra deployment. So if you're trying to go for a longer deployment, then you can swap out some fire sprays for these guys. And then if you can effectively, uh, I don't know what to call it, outpost a squadron, so you like place it out in front of a ship, and then allow the ship to move over it, and then try and consistently do that again and again, then you can kind of get away with not having rogue. But usually that gives you 2 turns of shooting, so like they'll run over you, you place it in the front and shoot them, and then the next turn, hopefully you get activated or they don't move very far and you can shoot them in the rear.
Yeah.
Or if they're really slow, you just leave them in the front when they get run over again. Okay, so C tier, I'm pretty happy with that. The next squadron is the TIE Defender. This is 5 speed, so it's a fast boy, 6 hull, 2 black, 2 blue against squadrons, 1 blue against ships, and it has the bomber keyword at 16 points. What do you think about that guy?
Uh, there's a lot of people who really like defenders, and I'm just not really one of them. Um, Again, like these are Sloan Squadron because every die on like every face on the blue die is something that Sloan wants against squadron or against ships because you can reroll. Well, actually, no, sorry, they're bombers. You're happy with the hits and the crits because of damage, and then you're happy with the accuracy. The problem with them is their price point. It makes it hard to flesh out a list and flesh out a squadron ball if you're including them, especially if you're including them en masse. And I guess like a another downside is that the two TIE Defender aces are so good that you might not even have enough plastic for the generics. Um, so yeah, I have them in C tier. They're kind of like TIE bombers in a way where like I don't know, they fill a niche and they're just not good outside of that niche.
I think so. I have them in A tier, and the reason I have them in A tier is because they're very fast. They have 6 holes, so they easily stick around. They're very good against squadrons with 2 black, 2 blue. So even without flight controllers or a reroll, they have a chance of locking down a squatter or scatter squadrons, which may as well be a squadron, I guess, sticking around. Uh, and then they're good at bombing, and with Sloan, they become extremely powerful. So I think I'm going to use my pull on this one and keep them at A tier,
Okay.
and then we'll be balanced out on our mulligans or whatever we want to call it.
Okay.
I think they are an A tier squadron. I think they belong up there with an A wing. Um, they have they're cheaper than a fire spray. They may not, in my opinion, they're not as good as a fire spray. I wouldn't use them as often because I'd rather have a dedicated anti squadron and then a bomber. But you could fill out your list with several of these guys, and I think they'd be very effective. All right, so A tier.
All right.
The next squadron I have is the TIE Fighter Squadron. So this is the starter squadron. Everybody knows what it does. It's speed 4, 3 hull, 3 blue anti-squadron, and then 1 blue anti-ship with swarm, and it's 8 points. So the pull of this squadron is that it's pretty cheap at 8 points. It has the ability to be revived with reserve hangar deck. So it's a cheap anti-squadron blocker. It can be effective when coupled with Howl Runner and flight controllers to get 5 blue dice, and then when you couple that with Sloan, they become pretty potent on the attack. Um, they're supposed to die, um, but if you have reserve hanger deck, you can keep these guys around and just perpetually keep an enemy squad ball off of you, which is super good. So for their price and because of their niche, like I think they belong at A tier. Um, you can put in 4 of these and then have a slew of reserve hanger decks. And uh, okay, maybe a B tier. I'm thinking about this just because there's several fleets going around that are squadless, and so you wouldn't be wasting that many points on squads. But if you could couple that with reserve hanger deck, then it starts to add up. So their use case is mostly anti-squad and then denial from shooting, not necessarily killing the other squad ball. All right, what do you think with B tier? You...
B tier is where I had them in my original ranking. Um, I think one of the best use cases for TIE fighters is just 4 of them. And you have, what's that, it's 32 points in squadrons, and it'll keep things off of you for maybe 2 rounds. Um, they're what they do is like, they're sacrificial, and they can kill a squadron or 2, but they're probably not going to do a whole lot because blue dice are fickle. Um, like you said, with Howl Runner and Flight Controller, they're pretty cool. But
I think they're definitely a first player squadron.
yes,
If you're a second player, you may never get to shoot with these guys.
yeah. But I think that's okay because, like, they can defend a whole zone, and yeah, I mean they're a B tier squadron in every way to me.
Yeah, okay. I think we agree. The next squadron, I'll talk about this one, then you can take the next two.
Sure.
The TIE Interceptor Squadron is speed 5, 3 hull, 4 blue anti squadron, and then 1 blue anti ship. It has the keyword swarm and it's 11 points. So this guy, I think is A tier. It's exceptionally good at anti squadron warfare. Um, Using the same combo of flight controllers, Howl Runner, you can get up to 6 dice with a reroll against an enemy squadron. So couple that with Sloan, or you don't even really need Sloan, but when you do add it in, it becomes extremely effective at killing aces. You get an accuracy, you flip their scatter. You get another accuracy, you lock down their brace, and then you just pump damage through. So having 2 TIE interceptors is enough to wipe out a scatter ace potentially. Um, and then they have reserve hanger deck, so they can come back from the grave, similar to TIE fighters. And this makes them better than TIE fighters because they have counter 2 as well, which I forgot to mention. But their counter 2 with Swarm and Howl Runner means that they can counter up to 3 at a time with a reroll. So they do good on the attack, they do good on the counter. They're only 2 lacking things. I guess there's 3. One is their low hull, but because they have reserve hanger deck, you don't really care. The other is they're not very good against ships, and they don't have rogue. So for what they do, they're very good at it. I think they belong at A tier.
Not having rogue can be a benefit in the Imperial faction, though.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, with Sloan.
These are like, I don't know. You said they're good in pairs, but like this is the quintessential spamming squadron in Empire for me. Uh, in other factions, 11 points is not really something that I want to have multiple of, but Um, I mean, they hit like a truck. The extra blue dye compared to TIE fighters. I mean, it is kind of like, I don't know. It's better, obviously, but um, it feels like it does more with this specific comparison. Um, Mainly because if you are lucky, these are one of the guys that can one shot for health squadrons like A-wings. Um, and if it has the support of flight controllers, which it probably will, and then HAL Runner, which it sometimes will, and that's just even better. So yeah, uh, interceptors are A tier.
All right, next up we have the Droid Side Fighter. What do you think about that guy?
All right, so I feel like for the Empire faction, interceptors are better than TIE fighters. With the Separatist faction, I feel like it's the opposite. I actually like the cheaper Vulture droids compared to the Tri Fighters. So I have Tri Fighters in C tier. Um, in all of the ways that interceptors are good, the Tri Fighter is also good. It does have a red dye for anti-squadron, which I don't really like, but it has a black dye for anti-ship, which, just like the A-wing, is pretty cool. The main issue is that like separatist squadrons just aren't that great overall, and their main focus is kind of just like throwing enough chaff in the way for their ships to like do the potent stuff. Um, and I would rather lose like if they had one more hull, I would like them a lot more, kind of like A-wings. But I would rather sacrifice a bunch of vulture droids than sacrifice tri fighters.
That's fair. Yeah, they have. I think they trade out their anti-squadron fourth dice to upgrade their anti-squad or anti-ship to a
Yeah,
black. So you can add in, uh, like you can boost their anti-squadron up by two dice if they're activated for one, and then if they have flight controllers for a second. So, and then they have swarm. So they're similar to TIE interceptors. They're better at anti-ship. Um, but in the context of CIS, I think that they're kind of like you said, a B tier squadron. If you want to do anti squadron, you really just want to take vultures. Um, I almost, I think they're like B plus.
I have them in C.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. So like I don't know. It's probably I don't know. Like it's just a contextual thing for me. Um,
Okay.
but I don't know. So like there are some worlds where you want the tri fighter. But like the main reason why you would want a squadron that does the anti-squadron battle really well, and then a black die for anti-ship, is if you plan on throwing all of your stuff into the squadron war, winning it, and then moving into bombing,
Hmm.
or if your stuff is a screen that if your opponent doesn't have any squads, then it also has a role as a bomber. So that would be like the A-wing for the second job, and then I'm not seeing. I guess like a TIE defender that it has a potent anti-squadron and a potent anti-ship. And the tri-fighter, yeah, it's like because the separatists aren't often winning the squadron war. Um, it's an 11-point squadron that fills the niche of an A-wing that can be sacrificial, but then if the opponent is squadless, it can bomb. Okay, um, but it doesn't do enough for me to justify the points, especially compared to Vulture droids. So like I have them in C, maybe B, but like compared to the other B tier squadrons, I just don't think they're there.
Okay. I will yield to your experience with those guys. Um, they do also have counter two. I don't know if we mentioned that.
They do.
So, unlike vultures, they don't get to shoot back. These guys would be able to, and they have swarm. So there is a little bit of consistent output on the return end.
They're like the elite Vulture droids, which
Okay.
in other factions you want that, and in separatists you don't want that as much.
Okay. What do you think about the V-19 Torrent from the Republic?
I think they're fine. Um, there's a lot of synergy with them, with some of the Delta 7 aces. I think so. Plo, Luminara, and Plo and Luminara both work really well with V19s. Um, I don't know. They're just a fine squadron to me. I guess they're like the interceptor slash like. Well, I don't know. They're just okay. I have them at C tier. I just there's not very many reasons for me to take them. So
Yeah, I would agree. I think the reason you don't take them is because you have Axe and Kickback, and those are the ones you're going to take.
right.
They don't cost much more. They've got defense tokens and great abilities. So there is no real use case for torrents unless you're, for some reason, trying to save points on your torrents. So I think C tier is a good spot for them. The next squadron we have up is the VCX 100 from the Rebels. It is speed 3, 8 hull, and has 3 anti squadron blue and 1 blue anti ship. It's got strategic, relay 1, heavy, and it is 15 points. Similar to the Lambda, the only other squadron with strategic. It brings in new opportunities for your list and then the ability to flip some objectives on your opponent. So for that alone, I think it gets up to B tier, and then I don't want to put it in A. I feel like I almost wouldn't take these guys unless I have a specific need for them. So I'm not going to take them up to A, but because of their hull and the ability to couple with Ruthless, someone else might want to put them in A tier. What do you think about that?
I had them originally in S tier, but the whole time we've been talking, I've been thinking about lowering them to A. I think they're better than the Lambdas because like the two more hull on like a squadron like this, that means a lot. It means it's harder for your opponent to disrupt. These guys kind of made the whole Farm Hawk fleet that terrorized the world last summer. Like they made that fleet possible.
True.
They were again, this was before I started playing, but Fish Farm was like the best fleet for a very long time.
Yeah, I think that was pre-Onager.
It was pre-Onager. I don't know. I think VCX is can sit next to Lambdas in A tier.
Okay, that's fair. I think the thing that really irks me about them is their 3 blue dice, and when I roll them, I am terribly inconsistent, and it makes me sad.
Oh yeah, I won my Worlds invite with Gallon Haven list with two VCXs, and you're happy when they get one hit. Um,
Yeah.
but like you mentioned, they're really fun to ruthless off of, and relay's good, strategic's great, so I'm
Yep.
good with them in A tier if you are.
Yeah, I'll compromise. That's fine. I think you're right. I think my own feelings towards them has made me want to put them lower, but I think they probably do belong at A tier. Up next is the Vulture Droid. You can talk about this guy since you've got so much experience with him.
Sure. So I would say so much. I like Separatists a lot. I was saying they were my favorite faction for a while, but I think I discovered that that was a lie, and I like all factions equally.
Oh,
Because
okay.
every time I pick one as a favorite, then I'm like, but yes, this other faction does really cool things too. Um, so Vulture Droids, I actually hate a lot, um, mainly because the red dice for anti-ship like sucks. But in the niche of the Separatist faction, they do a lot really well, and they hit like a truck. Like black dice with Swarm, I mean, man, it's really good. You're almost guaranteed 2 or 3 damage on your anti-squadron shots. Um, and they die, which kind of helps what separatists are trying to do sometimes. Like they're really good in Grievous. Um, so like the fleets that I've flown, I flew a trenchless that had 12 vulture droids for a while, and I flew it in two casual tournaments. I won one of them, and then I lost like lowest place in the other,
Ah,
which
shit.
really just shows how swingy they are. Um, but they fill the niche that they need to fill, and I have them in B tier because of that.
Man, they are very good at their niche. Um, Potent anti-squad, they have to be activated in order to be effective. But for a 7 point squadron to have
They're they're 8 points.
8 points? Oh, you're
Yeah.
right, you're right. So an 8 point squadron, they can come back with a reserve hangar deck. It's speed four, so it's pretty fast. It gives you the ability to alpha. And with flight controllers and AI, you get two black, two blue, similar to a TIE Defender. I feel like they belong in A tier.
Do you think they're interceptor good?
If they're activated, yes. If they're not activated, then it's like a guaranteed damage, but there's no counter. So I don't think they're as good as interceptors, but
Well, if you don't think they're as good as interceptors, like I think they're B tier.
okay. But
Um,
they're cheap.
they're cheap,
Yeah, you're right. They're 8 points
but
versus
like
11.
so like interceptors can help you. Like interceptors have the ability to help you win the squadron war because like they're only blue dice. Um, but I mean, I guess like if you consider their damage about equal, um, but interceptors are faster, and I don't know, like it's just kind of what separatists do. Like separatists are not killing the entire opponent's squadron ball most of the time,
Hmm.
and whereas interceptors might have some bombing potential if you're Sloan. Vulture droids really don't have any bombing potential. It's just like the red dice for anti-squadron that, or for anti-ship that keeps them out of A tier for me.
Okay. Well, you said B tier. I think I can agree with that. I'll go with that. But when I'm going against them, I will say, uh, if I have squads, I am a little bit timid because I know, okay, I'm going to lose something. These guys
Right.
are going to fly in and sling a lot of dice and probably kill something I care about. And then I'll kill them, and then hopefully I can manage the game enough to kill the enemy ship before it uses reserve hangar deck, or I can displace his squadron, and then usually by turns like 5 and 6, these guys aren't actually being activated. Usually the enemy ship is trying to either repair itself or get out, GTFO.
Yeah.
So I can I can see where you're coming from with B. We'll go ahead and put it there.
They so they pair perfectly with the hyenas. So like if you have the 4 and 4 of those two, and then maybe like Watt or something,
Hmm.
and B tier is my it needs help from something else tier. So like I don't like I said, the 12 Vulture droid fleet was not particularly great. Um, you need some extra support to make them good.
Yeah.
Or I mean, if you're flying them as like you can do the 32 points of just 4 Vulture droids, and that's fine too as a screen. But that means like your extra support is just like super killy ships. So
Hmm. Okay. So the next squadron we got here is the X-wing squadron from the Rebels. Everybody should know this guy. It's the Speed 3 5 hull, 4 blue anti-squadron and 1 red anti-ship with bomber keyword and escort. It's 13 points. I've had a lot of experience with these guys. I've thrown some Biggs balls and uh, Gallant Haven. What is it? Not Ruthless. Jan Wars lists. I think they're effective in that niche. But typically, if you have an X-wing, you really want it to have a double brace. When they're generic, they flop over and they die too fast. So I think they belong in the C tier. I don't think they're decent at anti-squadron. They don't get a reroll unless you have a Tauren, which I mean typically you do if you bring in squadrons.
And
But
Hera X-Wing.
and Terra? Oh, for rerolls, you're right. You're right. Yeah, we'll talk about her later, probably in another podcast.
Yeah.
But I think C tier is the right place for them. They feel like they don't do enough when I put them on the board. So in bombing, I think too often I get blanks when I'm rolling. Um, and then for anti-squadron, I feel like they kind of hold the line for a turn, but then they get just destroyed, and the stuff I care about after that turn is going to start dying. So, what do you think? Do you think C tier is the right place?
I have them in B tier. Personally, I again like they're the quintessential B in that like if you just have a couple of X-Wings, they're going to be really bad. But if you have the approximately like the full squadron ball of 4 X-Wings and some combination of Hera, Biggs, like Wedge, Fenn kind of helps the strategy a lot too now. Jan helps them. If you're putting in the extra points to make a dedicated escort ball with Biggs, it's really hard to take that down. There's not a lot of fleets that can really like fully take out 8 Biggs escorts. Um, Hera does a lot for that red die anti-squad or anti-ship because the adept can be used for your bombing role as well. And like if you have a bomber command center, then that just helps it even more. So they found their home in B tier for me just because that's where I've been putting all of the things that require a bunch of extra help. I mean, they're definitely. I don't know. I feel like they're better than the stuff that's in C tier.
I'm not convinced. I'll be honest. Um,
Okay.
I've flown these guys enough to know that if someone dedicates flak against these guys and has any squad ball, that these guys kind of crumble. Having bigs does help, but eventually the house of cards does come crumbling down. Um,
Yeah, so Biggs, like he doesn't really increase the survivability of the ball as a whole, but he makes it so that everything's going to die. Instead of stuff getting taken off the table incrementally, he makes it so that everything kind of dies at the end. And big balls are weaker against flak, and so yeah, I guess I could move him down to C. I just think there's some inherent power there, and I would be more likely to fly X-wings competitively than I would like. Well, actually, no. I'm fine with C tier for X-wings.
okay. Up next is the Y wing from the Rebels. It's speed 3, 6 hull. Very similar to the Republic Y wing, except it's got 2 blue anti squadron as opposed to the black blue from the Republic. And then one black for bombing, keyword bomber, and heavy at 10 points. So it's the same points as the Republic. The only difference is that one anti squadron die. How low do you think it brings this squadron?
So on paper, the only difference is that slight change.
Yes.
And if both of them were in the same faction, I guess, or like if we weren't taking into account the tools that the faction has to offer, that change would not do very much, and I might have them in like A or B. But because of the stuff that rebels tend to do, I have them in C tier. Um, so like rebels are like they want to get use out of things that are good in all situations in the squadron battles. So like A wings do anti squadron well, and they do bombing well. And there's just not a lot of home for a heavy speed 3 guy. Uh, Whereas in Republic, it's kind of all about, more like elite units. And so you're happy to, spam a bunch of Y-Wings and then focus on that synergy and keep them alive with Yularen or activate them all with a Venator. And I don't know, like it's a lot easier to take Ruthless Strategist in Republic, I feel like, because there's more things that have that slot open, namely the Venator 2. The Venator 2 makes the Y-Wing in the Republic really good, and there's just not something like that for Rebels. Um, so I have him in C tier.
Yeah, I can go with that. I almost want to put him in D tier just because if I want a dedicated bomber, I there's other things I would rather take in the Rebels.
Mm-hmm.
They're not good at anti-squadron with two blues. Oftentimes you just whiff. You'll get an accuracy and a crit or two accuracies, and it feels kind of pointless to shoot with them against a squadron.
Right. I
Um,
mean, I don't hate him in D tier. Uh, my instinct was C, but I'd be okay with him in D.
okay, that sounds good to me. So Y wings in D tier. So yeah, if you want a ruthless, really what you would want to have to do is bring like Vanguard, which may not stick around very long, and then a Gallon Haven or something like that, which would be effective, but there's so many better things to take with all the rebels that the excuse me the aces that the rebels have. Um, I think the only reason you take a Y wing is because you had 10 points to spare
Yeah, I
and
don't
you want a
disagree with
bomber.
that. Yeah,
But for the same price, we'll get to this in a moment. But for the same price, you can get a Z95 with another reserve hangar deck. So you really want to have that bomber or need to have something that you can spend on reserve or not reserve hangar deck. I'm losing all my words now. Ruthless strategist.
right.
Okay, so up next is a YT 1300. It is speed 2. It's from the Rebels, 7 hull, 3 anti squadron, and 1 anti ship. Keyword is escort, and it's 13 points. It's not heavy, but it's
They have
still
counter
speed
one
2.
too,
Oh yeah,
I
yeah, they
think.
have counter 1. You're right. Um, so this is a very niche like skew that you can use for to keep things alive. It's with bigs, it turns the bigs ball up to 10 because things just are very difficult to kill. When you couple this with wedge officer, it becomes like a speed 3 squadron, and then if you have all fighters follow me and you like burn that in a turn, if you have it on liberator or something like that or flag bridge, then these guys can go speed 3 and then +1 from wedge officer. So like they can be used as an anti-squadron screen, but their lack of maneuverability usually means that they are not where you want them to be, and the other player will just bounce around them and still do whatever they want. I think they have a niche. I think they belong in probably D tier, um, maybe F tier, just because of all the points you have to sink in to make them work.
Yeah, I have them in F tier. I'm not seeing it. Like the most direct comparison is with the Arc 170s because they're almost identical, except they have escort and they don't
Versus,
have bomber
yeah,
and
versus bomber.
they don't have two blue and they don't do anything that rebels want to do. And I don't know. I just all of the stuff that you were mentioning, like those synergies, it's like yes, but if you're going to play those cards, I'd rather have them with B wings
Mhm.
or I don't know, just like anything else. Um, the potency with the big ball got worse with the addition of Fen Rao, because Fen is also an escort with 7 hull, except he can go speed 3, and like he helps you activate a bunch of things. And so like he has more points that you're purposely putting damage onto, but I don't know, it's just like I don't see many homes for a YT 1300. So
Yeah. uh, I think the 13 points and the 7 hole is like the reason you would take them. You could put them or couple them with rapid launch bays, but again, like you said, if I'm going to do that, I'd rather have it with a B wing so that I can. They're a little more useful. All right,
there's never been a place that I've ever wanted a 1300, so I've got to
it's
go Rev.
true. Yeah, the only time I take them is when I'm memeing and I'm trying to make something bad work.
Yeah, fair.
So YT 2400 is our second to last squadron for the generics from a Rebels. 4 speed, 6 hull, 4 blue anti-squadron, and 1 black anti-ship. Its keyword is rogue, and it's 16 points. And there's not much debate to be had about this guy. It's easily the best generic squadron in the game. It's it. I would argue it needs to be probably 18 points, similar to the fire spray. It's effective at anti-squadron. It sticks around with 6 hull. It's fast enough it can go wherever you need it to be, usually. And then it's consistent on anti-ship. So extremely useful in all aspects of whatever squadron, uh, whatever use out of a squadron you may need. So easy S tier. What do you have to say?
I do feel like it is an S tier squadron, although I think in the current metagame, it's maybe A tier. I'm having it an S because it's just that good. But right now, like so the fleets that it's best in are fleets that want a potent like multi-use squadron and don't want to activate it. So like the Kraken Rogues list is very strong, and it gets a lot of use out of the YT 2400s. The main issue is that the meta right now is just not very MSU positive, and there's just so many things like Super Star Destroyers are good right now, and they just do so well against small ships. And Rebels are kind of in a weird place where they don't really want to have. I mean, I'm just like not seeing as many Rebel squadron lists that aren't utilizing Gallant Haven or something similar. Um, so I don't know. Like they're not as popular right now, but they're still really good. I I think Republic Y wings are more common, more competitive right now. So like that would probably be just a little bit higher, but yeah, YT 2400s are definitely one of the best squadrons in the game, and probably always will be. 18 points, I think they're still quite strong. Um, so yeah,
Okay. Yeah, super good. A little pricey, but I think with Rebels, usually you kind of, and in the squadron game, you kind of want to wait till the last turns in the squadron phase to move in order to get the most advantage.
mm-hmm.
So the YT 2400s and other rogues kind of leverage that. So it helps plan your next move, next turn. The other
Yeah,
thing about rogues we should bring up while we're talking about squadrons is like the double tap. So you can jump in and last first, essentially. So at the end of one round, use your rogues to jump in and attack a squadron, and then at the start of the next round, activate them and fly them away out of danger. And so you can get 2 shots off with however many squadrons you can activate, and then keep them out of danger, which is pretty huge. Just a little tip out there for people who are relatively new to the game. Our final squadron from the generics is the Z95 Headhunter. It is either loved or hated in the community for its 3 red dice against squadrons and 1 red dice against ships. It has a keyword swarm. It is 7 points. It's rebel, if I didn't already say that, and it's 3 hull and 3 speed. So just average speed, a light squadron with 3 hull, and very hit or miss with its dice. With the ability to be resurrected, it's used by rebel faction players to like pad their deployment typically, and not because they're good at anything other than that essentially. So I think they probably belong. This is kind of a hard one for me because I used to like these guys and then they let me down so much. I feel like they might belong in like C tier, but I could be convinced to put them in B tier.
I see. I've never flown Z's, and I honestly probably never will. I don't know, but so like maybe at the beginning of the year, I would have had these as a happy F, but over the course of this year, seeing Worlds and seeing the results from a few recent tournaments like Gen Con, um, I feel like Z's kind of have a place in the metagame right now. And it's only just because they are cheap and they are there to screen bombing. And bombing squadrons are really good. And a lot of bombing squadrons cannot kill 3 hit points in one go. So like if we're to take into account like the BTLB Y wings, they're probably going to get 2 damage if you have flight controllers. So like they wouldn't be able to kill a Z. A fire spray probably isn't going to be able to kill a Z. Scourge is not going to be able to kill a Z. So like all of these common bombing squadrons are going to take an entire one sixth of the possible attacks that they could ever make in a game on a 7 point squadron, which is going to save you 1 or 2 shields. So like I mean they're not there to actually hit things. They're there to take the hit. Not every fleet wants that, but some fleets really do. I think they're a B tier squadron right now.
Okay. Yeah. They're not there because they're good at attacking. They're good because they're just screening and then they come back.
Yes.
Essentially
Yeah.
like a TIE fighter, but a TIE fighter is much better at attack.
Right.
But the ability to the reason I have them in this certain place is um they are a cheap screen. You can get 4 of these guys for 28 points and then throw on some reserve hanger decks and then have a decent screen out there. Um but I think their supreme advantage is their ability to give you another deployment padding.
Yeah.
So people can leverage several of these to try and get that last deployment and then out deploy an onager or something else and dodge some arcs. So I'm okay with B.
Okay. Is there any
All right.
changes that you want to make before we
So
kind of go over everything?
yeah, so this after we've done all of the tier list, I thought we'd go through and each of us may change the position of one squadron, either up or down. Um, I haven't picked one out yet, but do you have one that you think would move?
No, I'm just kind of looking at things, and I think I've been keeping up to date with what we're at. I have 6 squadrons in A, B, and C, then only 5 in D and 7 in F. And so part of me, just for the aesthetic of it, I'm trying to think of an F squadron that I could move up to D, just to
Okay.
make things look nice. But I don't know. The Phantom is probably the best out of the F tier in my opinion. But
I would go for the decimator. And the reason why is because the amount of points you would spend on a flotilla, you'd spend on this guy. and it shoots.
Right, but would you rather have an extra activation or like a heavy squadron?
It sticks around. I
That's
think.
it though? Because like generic squadrons, like even at 8 hull, like if your opponent's trying to kill it, which they probably will, because like it paints a target on itself for being able to
Mhm.
hit so hard. Like it's gonna die.
Well, I'm not arguing to. I'm not arguing to put it up in like C or B or A tier.
Yeah.
I'm only trying to get it up to D tier. So I feel like I can make an argument to move that one up.
Mhm.
The Phantom, I feel like you don't take because if you want to bomb, you'll take something else. If you want to shoot squadrons, you'll definitely take a TIE fighter or an interceptor for cheaper.
All right. I mean, I'll make the fun argument for decimators in D
Okay.
tier, I guess. D for decimator. Uh, I don't know. I guess it's like the if fire sprays are S in your heart, decimators are F in my heart. Um, but sure, well we can even things out and make it that.
Okay. That looks very very structured, very
Yeah.
even.
Do you want to go over everything just for the audio listeners
Sure.
who lost track of our
We'll
rambling?
we'll start with the F tier. So I'll read F and then we'll alternate if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. The YV-666, the TIE Phantom, the Mandalorian Gauntlet Fighter, the Hawk 290, the Jumpmaster 5800, and the YT 1300 are all in the F tier.
Our D tier is the Aggressor Assault Frigate, the Belblub, the E-Wing, the Lancer, the Y-Wing for Rebels, and the VT-49 Decimator.
In the C tier, we have the B Wing, the Delta 7 Aethersprite, the TIE Bomber, the Droid TIE Fighter, the V-19 Torrent, and the X-Wing.
B tier is ARC 170s, Hyena, Skurg H6, TIE Fighters, Vulture Droids, and Z95s.
A tier is the A-Wing, Fire Spray, the Lambda Shuttle, TIE Defender, TIE Interceptor, and the VCX 100.
And then our S tier is the BTLB Republic Y-Wing and the YT-2400.
Okay, for our elevation section, I wanted to pick a squadron and then find a way to elevate it to bring it up. How does that sound?
That sounds great. That was my plan.
Oh, cool. All right. Look at us. It's like we've done this before.
Yeah. So I can go first. I
Okay.
would like to elevate the VT-49 Decimator, and actually make it worthwhile to me would just be to remove heavy or lower the points cost. And when we were talking about decimators, I went over this a bit, but just to elaborate, um, like heavy makes it so hard to interact in the squadron war because your opponent can tie it down with like just a scatter ace or two. Um, and they're just so close to being really fun. Well, they are really fun, but they're just so close to being competitive. Um, and I think I might pay like 18 points for them at their current level. I don't know, but then it's like I'd still rather have a fire spray. So I don't know. 16 to 18 points would probably make them worthwhile. It's just 22. The cost of a flotilla is far too much.
Okay. For me, I've already done the TIE Phantom on an earlier episode. That's the one that, in my heart, I feel like I love this squadron. I love the aesthetic of it, but it's just not. It's not there for the points, and it's not very effective. I think if I was going to elevate one of these squadrons, one that I think really deserves it is the Aggressor Assault Fighter. It's 3 speed, 5 hull, and 4 blue. Oh, I've got to be honest. I think it just deserves one more speed, and then but that just makes it into the YT 2400
Yeah. No,
with
if
one
it
less
was one
ball
more
counter.
speed, I think it would be honestly, if it was like speed 4, 6 hull, and then like it traded one die, like so it was 3 blues on the offense and then counter one. to kind of give it like the differentiation from the YT 2400.
Hmm.
I think that would be a really fun squadron.
Yeah, I feel like that would make it good. It would also make it a little too close to the YT 2400, but
Yeah.
that would be my choice. I think it needs one more speed. I've played
Yeah.
with it enough that 3 is okay, but there's too many times where I feel like I'd rather have 4. All right, well, thank you for listening to this podcast. If you liked it, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe on YouTube, or leave us a comment on Spotify.
Just to before we end, to build up the hype.
Oh yeah.
So next week we can do. I don't know. It took us this long to go over just the generics. Do you want to plan to do a two-parter for the uniques?
Ooh, we could do that. We
All right.
could.
So we could. We were talking before the pod about separating by faction. I felt like it was good to compare things between factions. And so what we could do is have the same list, but just go over Civil War next week and then Clone Wars the following week. Um, but like keep it all in the same list. Just do it in two separate pods for time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm down with that. An alternative would be, I'd like to posit to you is what if we do tiers C, D, and F one week, and then the next week do S, A, and B?
Oh yeah, that sounds good too.
All right. Well, we'll talk about this more off of the pod and make a decision. But thank you for listening. We appreciate it. If you guys want to reach out and have any comments, you can reach us on YouTube or just ping us in the Discord. So, a shout out this week I would like to put out there. If you're not already on the Amara Hub, go ahead and get on there. There's a lot of people talking about strategy. Any list that you are thinking about flying, you can post it there and people will give you some critiques. There's also online games happening all the time. So just post in the LFG uh, text chat and someone will pick you up and you guys can get a game off and going. Anyway, thanks for listening. And these tier lists will be posted online. So go ahead and fill one out and show us how you would tier all of these squadrons. I'm interested to see what everybody thinks about ours. Thank you again. Have a great day.